I don't know. We had a lot of apologies, though, many, many apologies. We went to great lengths not to, and I don't say that just for you to say, oh, wow, how sad, but to give you a sense that, for the two of us, and you should have seen us on the way over here in the car, checking our phones, looking at it, trying to watch the thing. Is we going to miss it? Are we going to make it? What's going on with the traffic? Who timed these lights? All these different questions. Because we were desperate. I feel honestly, we were desperate to be here in this room alongside you to say that it's time to take the power back, to say that we're going to save the planet, not to destroy it, that we're going to feed people, not starve them, and that we're going to end wars, not start them. I think it's critically important to reinforce before I get into my other remarks, exactly what Manolo said. I don't know where he went a few speakers ago, but about the importance of people power. Because I think when you look to your right, when you look to your left, when you look later to see how many people watched on the live stream, when you talk to your friends and your family and your coworkers who, when you tell them about it, say they wish they were there, those are the people you can count on in the moments of crisis when the entire media propaganda machine is turned against you. You certainly can't count on any of the politicians. That's 100% sure. Not in America, not in Europe. They all ran in the other direction. When the going gets tough, the politicians start running. Now, if we have 1 million people on the street, the phone at the Answer Coalition will be ringing off the hook from the politicians who want to speak. But when you have to get something started, when you know that everyone is going to say that you're the worst thing that has ever happened, you're a genocide denier, you're a Putin puppet, you're paid, you're this, you're that, the people you can count on are the people of conscience, the working and oppressed people of the world who know what is right and are willing to stand up and be counted, and that is you in this room. And I just want to say something very particular about that because, in the game of U.S. politics, the two sides are always trying to find a way to get one up on the other one, to think, let's see what level of discontent is out here in the populace, and let's see if we can play on that a little bit and we can, maybe get a few votes here and there. Some of us can remember, in the Yugoslavia War, the Republicans, they became very anti-war. They were against wars, so much so that George W. Bush, when he campaigned, in the year 2000, said, I'm not a nation builder. We're not going to go abroad and do all these different wars. George W. Bush. What happened next? And what's happening next week when George W. Bush is speaking with Zelensky at the George W. Bush Library? So right now, when the Republicans are saying, oh, we're against Ukraine, please. Marjorie Taylor Green, she wants to take the money going to Ukraine and send it to the southern border to kill Haitians and Guatemalans. Don't kill the white people, kill the brown people, and we'll all be fine. That's the nature of that two-faced opposition. So you can't rely on either of the major political parties in America, certainly not on the Labour Party or the Tory Party in the UK, not on the so-called socialist in Spain, not on the shameful Green Party of Germany that has turned its back on its history of opposing nuclear war that made it popular in the first place to become the most bloodthirsty warmongers in the European continent. So I'm proud to stand with you here today because I know that I can count on you and that we have each other's back and we're going to continue to grow and to build this movement. But, when we look at the plight of the world today, it's amazing when you think about it. We were in South Carolina, we were riding along, going from place to place, and the driver said, well, at least gas prices are going down a little bit. And, it made me reflect, knowing I'd be here in a few days, that, from Sudan to Sri Lanka to Sao Paulo to South Carolina to the South Bronx, working class people and poor people on every corner of the globe are suffering from a massive cost of living crisis. And a cost of living crisis is not solely this war, but it's been so heavily exacerbated by the war, you can't separate it. Obviously, when we're talking about gas prices. Also, when we're talking about hunger, about famine, which has already been mentioned, the hundreds of millions of people. And those numbers, as any humanitarian agency will tell you, are always an undercount. They're always an undercount. We could have 1 billion people going hungry if we really get in the nooks and crannies of every place. You mentioned I was in Ethiopia. You go to some of these back areas there that, they're barely connected to what's going on. But there are people who are there who are starving. They probably aren't being counted. So on every corner of the globe, this is happening. And it was mentioned by Dr. Jill Stein very well that sanctions are playing such a key role in this. You look at what's happening with the agricultural crisis now, and I'm not going to quote all the numbers, but you look at some of these different pieces on fertilizers especially, which is a big piece that people forget. You're talking about right now, the crisis right now, but don't forget the crisis in fertilizers affects the crops next year. So it's not just right now, it's next year, and it could be the year after that. Largest ammonia pipeline is an important part of fertilizers in the world, which runs from Russia through Europe, closed. Urea from Russia, which is a major part of fertilizer, 22% down the year, January to August. So even after the grain deal, we're still seeing it. And some of this can be replaced. And that's what a lot of the people criticizing this event might say. And I'm sure they're watching right now and typing it up so they can criticize me for not knowing what I'm talking about. And they say, oh, well, Brazil, yeah, they used to import a lot of wheat and fertilizer from Russia, but they replaced it from Canada. Well, the reality of this is it's not simply about the issue of the crops themselves. Can I get something from here and bring it over here? It's about the way the markets work. You want to know who's having a good year this year? The Chicago Mercantile Exchange, I'll tell you that, where they're trading all these futures and commodities for all these foods, wheat and the like. Because ultimately, these speculators, Wall Street extended, these speculators look at every possible crisis, every bit of volatility, and they jack up the prices. So you can get it if you can afford it. In Somalia, they can't afford it. In Sudan, they can't afford it. In Sri Lanka, they're struggling to afford it, and thankfully for them, Russia has given them some of it for free and cheaply. So you've got this massive manipulation of the food markets, of the oil markets, which is going to get worse with this crazy scheme for an oil price cap in the start of December that even Citibank says sounds crazy, could introduce drastic chaos into the market. People who live in New York, you know what I'm talking about because you got the email from Con Ed saying your bill is guaranteed to go up 28 to 32% this winter. It's not just in Europe where people are going to be cold because they can't pay. So we have this massive manipulation that's going on all because of the sanctions mainly, but also the war because they'll say, well, if it turns this way, maybe Russia won't be able to do that. We're going to jack it up another $5. If it turns that way, well, maybe this isn't going to come out of some Ukrainian port. Jack it up another $15. So whatever they can do to make as much money as possible. And don't forget, 54 cents out of every dollar of inflation is going to profits. So they don't have to raise the prices, but they want to because that's how they live, the suffering of others. That's that 1%, that chart. How do they get that 1%? Because everybody else is at the bottom. It's a direct connection. So we can see the impact of this war is so unbelievable on almost every person, really, who's not in that 1%, in almost every part of the world. And it's an amazing scenario because despite that, and despite the fact that we're on the precipice of nuclear war, the International Committee of the Red Cross said that there would be catastrophic humanitarian consequences from even a limited nuclear war, whatever that is. The nuclear bombs they have now, my father, many years ago, he went to Hiroshima not that long after the bombing, and I remember he told me that it stuck with him for the rest of his life because some people had been vaporized so quickly that their shadows were burned onto the wall. And the nuclear weapons they have now are 50 times stronger than that. You drop one of those on a major city. I looked at a map, actually, of what would happen in New York City the other day. Gone. This, gone. Forget it. Nuclear winter. Crops destroyed. Water poisoned. Hundreds, maybe thousands of years before you would even be able to do it. Talk about sowing salt in the soil. This is 1,000,000 times worse than that. But despite the fact that the globe is staring down the barrel of millions being turned into ash. And if you want to know how close it is, look how quickly the U.S. called Zelensky and said, whoa, about the Poland missile. And that tells you something about Zelensky and about the Ukrainian government. I'm going to come, because to be honest with you, they had to have known what had happened. And instead of telling the truth, they went out of their way to try to create the basis by which Article 5 of NATO would be invoked, in which NATO would then go into Ukraine and fight Russia, and then we would be in a nuclear conflict. Deliberately. So despite the fact that the world is on the brink of existential nuclear crisis, catastrophe, world-ending consequences, despite the fact that tens, hundreds of millions of people are struggling to make it. 161 million people here in the United States have at least some trouble meeting their basic expenses week to week. 161 million, that number has grown by 24 million since March. And that's in the richest country of all countries. So imagine people who don't live here and how much they might be struggling. You know, in Sudan right now, they're saying, I saw a headline the other day, that people are scared and hungry because not only can they not afford the things they need now, but they don't know how much worse it's gonna get. But despite that, we are told that we don't have the right to speak. All these internet trolls who came out had so many things to say about this event. It's so easy to talk tough online, isn't it? You know? People posting, if you want to disrupt the event at the People's Forum, here's a video on how to do it. Well, if you want to disrupt, I'm here right now and I'm ready. When do we have the right to speak? Can the people in Congo speak? How come no one is even talking about Congo right now? War going on there. War been going on for multiple decades. Maybe as many as 10 million people died. That never really makes the front page. Never really makes the front page. Can the people who I saw when I was recently in Brazil on the side of the road, no food to eat, no money, no heat, no shelter, when does their voice get heard? When the guy who was driving us around in South Carolina is a retired person just trying to get a little change in his pocket, driving people around, having it all eaten up by gas prices, does he have the right to speak? And who are the people who are lecturing us? They say, well, when are you going to let the Ukrainians speak? Well, I mean, Zelensky is on TV every day. Every organization on earth is breaking every rule. They say, oh, well, you can't speak virtually at the UN General Assembly except Zelensky. Oh, we're going to have a joint meeting of Congress where you can speak virtually. George Bush W. Library, CBS, NBC, all of them, all day. And he's got a beautiful green screen. You've all seen it. He's a great actor. So, you know, they got a whole media setup. So I don't even know what they're talking about, but it's a little bit more pernicious than that, because what do they really mean when they say you're not letting the Ukrainians speak? What they really mean is you're not letting the right Ukrainians speak. Because they don't want you to know that Zelensky banned every opposition political party. All the media was banned and put under one military command, so you can only hear what they want you to hear. So they don't want those Ukrainians to speak. You know, they certainly don't want the trade unions to speak. You know, they banned the right to strike in Ukraine. At the same time, they took down the trade union laws to make it easier to exploit the workers and to sell the land to Europeans. I remember reading an article at the end of last year, and it was talking about this issue of the food crisis and whether or not Ukrainian farmers were going to be able to, you know, harvest their crops and so on and so forth. It was a Reuters article, and the guy that was quoted in the Reuters article was a Dutch farmer who had come in and bought this land in Ukraine because under the past couple regimes from Poroshenko on, they've been selling off the land. They got rid of the old hangover from the Soviet era of not having that corporate agribusiness. And, you know, you can see the impact of that because some other Ukrainians they don't want to hear speak certainly are the Kananovich brothers, political prisoners who are most well known for standing up against these neoliberal laws like selling the land to the highest bidder, whether it's in the Netherlands or New York or wherever they're coming from, destroying the trade unions, impoverishing the people of Ukraine, and they have been tried as spies for daring to speak up about what's going on in their own country. So they don't want to hear from those Ukrainians either. The only Ukrainians you're allowed to hear from, who are supposed to represent everyone else and get to determine what every country is allowed to do at any given time, whether you eat, whether you die, somehow it has to come from somebody affiliated with this war drive, and that's considered legitimate. So it's not about letting Ukrainians speak. It's not about self-determination. It's about promoting war. And it's about keeping dissenting voices from entering into the conversation. I mean, how many people even know there are Ukrainians against the war? Basically no one. Basically no one. So I think we have reached a really an unbelievable precipice here where we must act. And I think this is an extraordinarily important event. I think we'll all look back on it and think about how important it is. You know, you never really know exactly where you are in the stage of history. But I can say when you do something tough, I mean, many of us can remember we were standing up for Libya. Everyone said, you're crazy. And now everyone says, what a disaster. When we first stood up for Iraq, they said, well, you're paid by Saddam Hussein. And now they say, what a disaster. So it's always later that everybody comes along and says, yeah, you were right. But in the moments where it was tough to stand up, that is what kicked off the ability of other people who were understandably fearful of the onslaught on your reputation, your job, everything against you if you stand up against the war machine. And it takes other people to stand up and create the space for others to feel that they have strength, that they have power, that definitely they're not crazy, and ultimately that they are not alone. So I just want to end by encouraging you to continue to stand up and continue to raise your voices. Don't be cowed. Don't be lectured by these warmongers. I certainly will not be. I'm not going to be lectured by people who would rather lift up the legacy of Nazi murderers than the legacy of the millions of Ukrainians who bravely fought to defeat the Nazi war machine. And I am absolutely not going to be lectured by the people who beat African students so they could ride their Jim Crow trains all the way into exile in Western Europe. And let's spare a word for the people who want to talk constantly about refugees. Every app I have said, you want to donate to refugees. And I'm all for donating for refugees. I hope they're all living as well as they can coming from Ukraine. I'm all for that. But what about the refugees dying by the thousands in the Mediterranean Sea? Because all the people who say we love Ukraine, all these governments in Europe who say we love Ukraine also say do everything possible to kill those Africans. They even say let's pay other countries to torture them. Have you seen what they do to Africans in Libya now? Have you seen what they used to give them jobs, money, and education? Now they're torturing them in dark chambers with electricity and everything else you could think of. So don't be lectured by those people. Don't be cowed by those people. Don't be pushed back by those people. You are right, they are wrong. Peace is our imperative. Peace is our challenge. There's a lot we're going to have to do to continue to push past this. You know, I don't know, this is maybe a shameless plug, but the work we do at Breakthrough News and other, media outlets, we don't just do it randomly. We don't do it because we love to be accused of being a part of international conspiracies to destroy the world. We do it because knowledge is power. A book can be more powerful than a grenade if you use it, right? But people are deliberately starved and denied of the knowledge they need to take the action that can change the world. And we have to do everything we can, 1-to-1, 2-to-2, 5-to-5, at the dinner table, on our independent media. I don't even know, just screaming out in the street, whatever we have to do, because these people have billions of dollars, hundreds of television channels, and they're doing everything possible to confuse people about what's really going on right now. So this is going to be a tough fight, a very difficult one. It's been difficult so far. I mean, anyone in here who's tried to talk about Ukraine with anybody who didn't agree with you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not like it was easy. You had to sort through about 1,000 different layers of propaganda before you even got to the real issue. But if we do it together, we can win. If we stand side by side, we can win. If we aren't afraid to go where other people say we shouldn't go and talk to people, we can win. But we have to remember that this is really and truly an existential crisis for humanity. And as Dr. Chomsky also put out, he said, I'm sorry if these words sound hyperbolic. That's the thing that they make you think you're crazy. They say, well, how could this be the case? It is the case. And it's only by people standing up and saying it as loud as we possibly can that we can turn it around. But people power has defeated every terrible institution, regime you could ever imagine. Ever imagine. I mean, you think about the odds that people have gone through. Imagine Harriet Tubman running through the swamps with dogs chasing behind her after being up for 24 hours straight, trying to take somebody and get them freedom to slavery. Now, most people said to her, why do you keep going back? Why would you do this? But she never stopped. And when the country caught up with her, she didn't say, okay, cool, I'm gonna go chill. No, she enlisted in the war effort and she led Union troops back into the South to defeat the slave owners in South Carolina. It's always darkest before the dawn, and I'm honored to be able to stand here with you. I'm honored to be able to stand here with these august panelists, and I'm very much looking forward to moving from this event to the next event to the next event until we win and get rid of the threat of nuclear war, get rid of the threat of hunger and famine, get rid of unemployment, get rid of every negative thing that we see out on the streets that drives us crazy. We can do it together, and we'll do it if we're organized and if we're ready to win.